Today is the 7th of Cheshvan, the 8th.
Wait, when did we change?
Today. Last night.
Oh, yeah.
Beside him.
Okay, yeah.
When you make a mistake at night, it doesn't even count. Nobody's awake. It's like, out of the oven, and we go back.
But we now changed both.
Yeah. But that's only here in Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
In America, it's like December or something.
Somebody give a board to the Chassidus.
Okay, so we're up to chapter 26 in Shorsh Mitzvah Tefillah, Amud Kuf Kaf Tet. And this chapter I actually wanted to skip. Now I hope I can remember it. There's only one point I wanted to take out of it, but since I don't see that I even marked what I wanted to take out of it. The topic here, just so that we know, is a very important topic. It's called the Shtalshelut HaKtarim Ze Mize, the descent of the crowns one from another. But it's only a very minor topic. Everything else is mostly a repetition of what we saw. And one interesting scientific point about the atmosphere, that when you go up, it gets colder for a while and then it gets hotter again. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Right.
It's not so well known. I made a mistake the first time I read it here. In a different mitzvah he talks about it.
I have
no idea. I think they just surmised that there must be some reason that it's getting colder, but it's not natural because it's closer to the sun. But we know today that it's not because of that. Obviously, space is much colder than the Everest.
Yes.
So there's a special effect. I don't remember what it's called. In the higher regions of the atmosphere that causes it to get really, really hot. I mean, really hot. I'm talking about like 1,000 degrees, I think. It's like,
they have special
really
things on those.
they have. That's also because of the friction, but there's also because of heat. It's actually hotter.
Friction here is there's no air.
Yeah, as little air as there is, there's a lot of friction, and it just gets worse as you go down. There's more and more. Okay. So I'm wondering if I can quickly recognize what I thought was a new idea here. Another thing, kavav. So another thing that he mentions here is another topic. This we can look at it very quickly. Is Adam Kadmon, primordial man? What we mean by that? So in general, when we say that we say primordial man, what we mean is the first thing that God emanated. And it's in the form of a human, as it were. It has the form of a chesed, like the spheros are already, the spherot are already in a certain alignment in 3 axes. So we call this the form of the man. But there's an interesting thing that this in the Zohar is called Adam de Bria. It's not called Adam Kadmon. It's not called primordial man. It's called man of creation. It's a very interesting thing why the Zohar calls it like that. So the Arizal has this theory about it. And he says that really it's called the man of creation because there's a man of emanation even higher. And that, he says, is the world before the tzimtzum, before the contraction. But the Zohar doesn't talk about it, so he's not going to talk about it. And he has his whole theory about it. And there's a lot to discuss about it. Here he just mentions it in passing. And he says, Adam Kadmon, primordial man, is what we refer to as Keter HaKlali. So I'm skipping all the way down to the bottom of 258, where he says this. שבכללות העולמות שהוא האדם הקדמון, שנקרא כתר הכללי כנ"ל. Second to last line. Now, he's called the crown, the general crown. So in every world we have a crown and then Chochmah, Bina, and so on. And we said that according to the Magid, the infinite dwells, first of all, appears through Chochmah. So what is the crown then? What is the crown? If the infinite reveals itself first in the wisdom, so what's the crown above it? V'nei be'ak melubasha kav me'or en sof mamash. He says that Ak, the primordial man, the crown is where the ray of infinite light from the infinite appears. That's where it's actually enclosed. It's not just an appearance of it. It's where it's enclosed. It's where it is. מה שאין כן באצילות, אפילו בכתר דאצילות הוא רק הארת הקו. But lower than that, what you'll find is only an illumination, meaning a light, a revelation that comes out of this ray. Now, what is this ray? So there's different descriptions of what this ray of light is, this kav. How should we even understand it? So the simplest way is how the Ari interprets it. He says, after God contracted and created an empty space, as it were. What we mean by empty space, he says, is that the infinite light is not revealed. So then he had to bring down a ray of his infinite revelation into that space. So the question that everybody asks is, why do you have to bring down a new ray? All you had to do was, instead of making the contraction total, so just contract all your light into a ray. Meaning make the contraction create the ray. Why do you have to bring down a new ray?
Where's the Rashimu here?
So that's part of what they say. So the Rishimu would just be, meaning the residue would be where the ray isn't.
The Ari mentions the Rashimu?
Can, of course. It's a big deal for him. The Rishimu is not his invention. It's already in the Ramak. There's a Rishimu, but he definitely mentions that there's a residue. Meaning, the moment that he tells you there's a residue, so you understand that the thing is not total. You can't understand this whole contraction thing as a complete disappearance of God's infinite revelation. There must be something left over. In any case, so the kav is understood to be something new because it is something new. It's not the original. Meaning, if he would have contracted his original revelation into a line, into a ray, so that would have been one thing. But now he's bringing down something new. It really is something new. It's not to say it's otherwise. What's the point? Make the contraction exactly in the shape that you want it. Retain a line. But he doesn't do that, so he brings down something new. So what is this something new? So we call this the neshama of Ak. We call this the soul. And the idea is the same thing as when Hashem created man. First he creates the body, and then he breathes into him the breath of life. Right, so exactly. So that's how we see it. That the whole space that was left over, which is supposedly empty from God's revelation, that's the feminine. That's the body. And the ray that comes down, that's the masculine. That's the soul of this body. It's going to becomes, and it's something new. It's true that everything is contained in God, but here he's revealing something new. So that's why it's called, in the end, it's called Adam Kadmon. It's called the primordial man, because the idea here is that it's following the same order of things that happened when Hashem created Adam. The first created the body, then he instills into it, brings into it the breath of life. So that's why many times the kav is actually called kav chaim. It's called the ray of life. Life and light are almost interchangeable here. It's bringing down a ray of light. So what does this have to do with anything that we're doing? Why do we care? So first of all, you could say because we've been discussing all of these differences between emanation and creation, formation, and action, and this is another one of those differences, as we'll see in a moment. But really, there is a certain amount of review here of basic Kabbalah and the way that Chassidus understands basic Kabbalah. ואם כן בחינת האור חוזר שבסיום הערת הקו שבמלכות דאצילות מאיר באור חוזר ממטה למעלה מבחינת תחילתן היינו מהערת הקו שבכתר עליון לכן על ידי זה מהווה מאין ליש בביאה כנ"ל. But he here wants to add something more. And he says, this ray of light, when it hits the bottom, what's the bottom? What exactly is the bottom? So the bottom is the world of action, let's say. So when everything culminates in a person, the person's soul becomes active, and you actually do something, and then you get feedback from the world. The world gives you feedback. So the feedback is like a returning light. It's like you're going back. So that's the whole question about life. Ken, here it doesn't go all the way down there, but he means that it hits something, right? So I'm saying like in the same way in a person, that when I do something and then I hit the bottom, so I get a reflection. I get feedback from the world about what I did. So here too, it's like that this ray of light, this kav of Adam Kadmon, it hits its bottom. Its bottom really is all the way down to action. But here it's saying even when it hits just Malchus of Atzilus, even if it hit its Malchus, its action, okay, it's a level of action, it gets a feedback. Now what does this feedback do? This causes there to be not the regular, like we said, succession of ilah ve'alul, of cause and effect, but rather being from nothing in the lower worlds. So what's going on here? What are we saying? We're saying that a lot of times we don't understand what in the world we're doing. How are we affecting anything? The classic example, the most powerful example is that a person is learning Torah in his room, and we say that somehow this is sustaining the world. You say, what do you mean, how are you sustaining the world? You're in your own room, what's going on? He says, no, the very fact that you are doing the process which is cause and effect, the process of understanding Hashem and nullifying to Him through the Torah, which is the ultimate example of emanation. The best example of something that's completely nullified in God is Torah. That's why we say, it's the same thing. What we mean to say is that it's completely the same thing. It's nullified. It knows exactly what its origin is. You can't learn Torah and disconnect it. The moment that you disconnect it, it becomes the poison. It becomes something exactly opposite from what it was meant to be. It's very important. If you disconnect the Torah, if you study Torah in university, you're poisoning yourself. Why? Because there's no recognition that this is from God. There was a fast day once. We don't do this anymore, although a fast day. Although there are claims that Asara b'Tevet, that the 10th day of Tevet is for this. That one of the things that happened on the 9th of Tevet, the translation of the Torah into Greek. And what's the deal with the translation? What's the problem? Today the Torah is translated almost into every language. Yeah, but today it says on the top, Torah tzivah lanu Moshe v'rasha kilat. This is the Torah that Moses commanded us from Hashem. Today everybody knows that this is a revelatory text.
I mean our translations.
Our translations, right? We write on them very clearly. This is the Torah that we received from Hashem. We don't change that. And their idea was that this is wisdom. It's true, there's wisdom in it, but even this wisdom came from God. And so that's a huge problem. So the person sits in his room and he's learning. And what does that do? What does that do in the world? How can I say that affects the world? So he says every time that you bring the sugya, meaning you bring the issue in Torah down to action, you bring it down to halacha. Halacha lemaaseh. This is what you have to do. This is the ruling. This is how you should act.
Reading things that aren't halacha.
Same thing. You have to bring it into what in Chassidus we call uvechen. The uvechen is so what? So what about it? What do you take from this? How are you going to act differently? If it doesn't churn into that, then it hasn't hit the Malchus of Atzilus. It hasn't hit the bottom. But then he says something amazing. That when it hits the bottom of your world, in your world, you haven't done anything really. You just sat there and thought. So you should know that what it acts in below you is to create something from nothing. That's the theory here.
I don't understand.
It's like that you're pounding on a table, and there's a whole world underneath that table, and they're waiting to hear what you pound. And the moment that you pound, it causes some kind of frequency change below, and things come out of nowhere.
Even if you don't understand.
So I'll give you an example. Even if you don't understand. So what's a classic example? The classic example is rain, right? What does rain do? It pounds on the earth. That's all it does. It's just a ray of light. It's just, in this case, rain, same idea. It's pounding on the earth, and then you come back 2 days later, and you see something came out of nothing. That's what it looks like. I'm not saying that but even the seed becoming something has to rot.
Yeah.
It has to rot, and then it comes out. So there's something about this pounding effect that causes things to happen below. By us, it's the same thing with prayer. That when we get the words out, that's like the Malchus of Atzilus for us. That's the world of speech. And that's it. I mean, did I do something by speaking? What did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm sitting in the shul, and all I'm doing is saying words. So what does this change in the world? He says, no, this is exactly like rain. Even there's even an analogy like this in the prophets. They say that Hashem says, can the rain come down and not cause things to grow? In that same way, when I say something, it has to happen. Says the prophet. I don't remember if this is Isaiah or Jeremiah. One of them says this. That when I speak, it happens. Why? Because that's what Malchus is. That's what kingdom is. Don't think that your words don't do anything. They do. I mean, that's how it's related to here. It doesn't say this explicitly, but that's the understanding.
It's easy
here.
to understand these things.
What?
With modern science, it's easy to understand.
Right, today.
And chaos theory, the butterfly up there,
The butterfly
you
effect.
can cause a cyclone down in Australia, just the flutter of the wings of the butterfly. So it's easy to understand these things. When
It's easier. Yeah, it's easier. Okay. So, and here, don't think it has to be of the same caliber. Like the butterfly is just this tiny flap of a wing. But what you get later on, even though that's still cause and effect, but it's a very complicated cause and effect, here we're saying it's mamish a jump, it's a leap. There's a leap that happens, and something comes out of nothing. That's why I think the exact analogy is the seed sprouting.
Rav Gabriel's point, I didn't hear very well.
With chaos, it's called the butterfly effect. That a butterfly flaps its wings in in Louisiana, and you get a typhoon in.
It's very important science.
It's true because there are such functions. There's functions that we know about. They're very simple functions that you move them a little bit. Much later, the effect is gargantuan.
And this is scientific.
This is mathematical.
It's mathematical.
It's mathematical. That's the other book I gave you, James Glick. Chaos. Okay, so we need to end. I think this is the most we're going to get out of this chapter. So B'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll continue with 27, chapter 27.